Hey, so welcome back to Born Superhuman. I have the most beautiful guest with me today. Lisa, it's amazing to have you here. I know you just got back from Bali, where you're out there doing another retreat, but would love to start off by talking about epigenetics. This is your specialty, but so many people don't understand it or know what it is. So to start with, let's go right to the point. What is epigenetics?
It's such a big word, right? I understand. Yeah. Epigenetics. Well, first of all, let me back up. We each have our own DNA code that's unique to us. You're not going to find the same DNA code unless there's identical twins. There's going to be the most similarity in that mixture. But our DNA code is determines how tall we are. If we're 5'6" or 6'7", it gives us brown, green, or blue eyes. And that is a fixed code. But how our DNA expresses itself is through our epigenetics, and that is based on the life experiences of our ancestors. So we inherit many good things from our ancestors, our athletic abilities, our love for knowledge, our musical talents, our gift of charisma. But we also inherit their life experiences. So their traumas and their phobias and their limiting beliefs get passed down in our cellular memory. And there's actually, Dan, a scientific term for it. They're called informational tags. And an informational tag can get turned on at any time in our life. So a childhood trauma that brings about shame could trigger that informational tag of inherited shame to turn on. And then the subconscious traps this lifetime experiences and says, yep, this is who you are. You're going to be embarrassed if you open your mouth. You're going to feel humiliated when you don't get it right. So you better not do that. Better not speak up.
That's
Hmm.
fascinating because I was talking to my mum. My mum's a brilliant doctor, but she grew up with the fear of spiders.
Yeah, me
And
too.
not knowing why,
Yeah,
because went back and found out that her great grandmother got bitten by a poisonous spider and almost died. So my
yeah.
mother had never had an experience bad with a spider, but grew up. So it makes total sense.
Total sense. And how one child can have this fear of spiders, but the other one doesn't. And it just is. And it goes back generationally to somebody probably being bit, almost dying from a spider bite. And that fear of the spider gets passed on. So then the 3-year-old runs up against a spider and freaks out, but's never had an experience with a spider. It just is. Yeah. Great example.
Crazy because um, when I look at the thought that we are not our own person, because that's what we're taught up, right? You're your own person. We never
Right.
look back at the DNA of emotional content within ourselves. How far back can you go as far as generational impact through epigenetics?
It doesn't have an end zone. It doesn't have an end to it. It can go back 20 generations. I've cleared stuff from 25 generations. There's content out that says, oh, only 3 generations or only 7 generations. People will say, oh, in scriptures, it talks about the 7 generational curse or whatever. But really, it can get passed down way longer than that, way farther back than 3 or 7 generations. Mm-hmm.
So that means if somebody doesn't like an apple, it goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. Okay, I'm just
Yes,
joking.
I
Oh,
love that. Absolutely.
an apple a day keeps the doctor away. No,
Yeah, that's right. I have never found anything that went back that far, but it is absolutely possible.
no, I'm just obviously joking, but
I
it
know.
makes no sense. So the question I have, and I want to just touch on this lightly because we're going to go into this deeper as we talk,
Okay.
but with the trauma that's been passed down over generations,
Hmm.
is it possible to fix it if it's part of our DNA?
Absolutely, it is. In fact, researchers at Mount Sinai have researched this and found that what they did is they studied 3 groups of people. They studied Holocaust survivors, pregnant women that were present at 9/11, as well as military members who served in war. And they found that trauma can be passed down intergenerationally, that's one generation, as well as transgenerationally. But what they found also in this study was that it can be healed at the same time. So yes, there's science out that says that this inherited trauma can be healed.
That's why I wanted to bring you on here. I kind of knew the answer because I've experienced it myself with you.
Mm,
This is what you do as a genius and a guru known throughout the world. But before we get to that, I want
mm.
to go back. Tell me about you as a little girl. What did you grow
Back
up
in time.
wanting to be? What did you want to, what
Mm.
were your dreams? Because I'm sure you didn't grow up as a 3-year-old and go, I want to be an epigeneticist. I don't know what you'd call it.
Just
But
an epigenetic specialist. How's that? Because I don't have a PhD and I'm not a doctor. This has come from just years of experience. And then my desiring to know more brought me into the science of epigenetics. I had a strong desire to prove what I was doing and helping other people do, that I just knew there was so much reality to it, that I then went on that Alice in Wonderland, chasing the rabbit down the hole to find the proof of what was happening.
Yeah,
That's how I got where I am.
yeah, I want to bring that up later because remember,
Okay.
right, Alice in Wonderland, because I
Okay.
want to bring that.
I'll remember.
But let's go back to this 2, 3 year old girl. What did you want to be growing up?
That's a great question. I grew up with a lot of rules, a lot of tasks, and I'm not badding my parents. I had great parents. When I was a child, I didn't realize it was a gift, but I was raised with a lot of fear. So I had a lot of fear around who I was. So, especially at night, actually, it didn't really matter. I saw spirits, but I didn't have anybody to teach me about why I was the way I was. And my mother was wonderful she never judged me for that. But I was told not to ever tell anybody. So, Lisa, if you tell your friends that their imaginary friend is real, standing by them, they're going to tell their parents, and you're not going to have any friends. So don't ever tell anybody, that you have this. The other aspect of it is I really felt like it was a curse. Like, okay, in religion, in scripture, we're taught that those are soothsayers. Those people fall into soothsayers and they're evil. And yet God made me the way I am. So it was very much a dichotomy in my life. Actually, it wasn't even a dichotomy. It was a real burden. And at night, sometimes I would have a hard time going to sleep, because if spirits know that you hear them or that you see them, those that have stayed earthbound want to deliver a message. So they'd wake me up. And I didn't know how to receive that. I wasn't wise. I wasn't schooled, so to speak. And I would have this woman come to me that would look to me as a child like an American Indian. Okay. And she would come and she'd create like these dioramas, these visuals for me in my room. Because sometimes I would lay in bed so frightened that I would just sweat. I wouldn't want to move. And she would come in, she would sit on the edge of my bed, she would sing to me, and she'd create this beautiful visual of like a teepee and a family and a baby, and they were all busy. And I just felt like I fit into this family, and I'd fall asleep. Well, years later, I had postpartum depression, Dan, and I didn't know what it was. It's hard to imagine that a woman nowadays could not know what depression was, but I didn't. So again, I felt that there was something wrong with me. Now, my childhood experience became part of me, but it's not like I lived in it. It's not like I walked around and said, "Oh, I can't be who I want to be." It wasn't that concrete. And yet it lived within me like that, in a sense. And when we suppress during our life, what happens is depression. Suppression will cause depression in anybody's life. At some point, we have to face that. Well, mine was in postpartum depression, but I didn't know there was a term called that. So I just thought that there was something wrong with me. And one day I was sitting out in my backyard, because leaning up against my garage door, literally, and I hear, "Lisa, it's me." And I'm like, "And what's your name?" I recognized the voice. I didn't see her. I recognized the voice. And she said, "I want you to ask your father." I did not want to tell my father that I heard a voice saying for me to ask him, but I did. I did. And he could not have been more gracious and more loving and more supportive. And he said, "Lisa, I know who this is. Her name is Ethel." And in that moment, when he said that, tears, just like tears of joy, started to run through, just fall from my eyes. And I realized that this was the woman that was my childhood friend. So if you have children that say they have childhood friends, believe them, because they really do. And I knew instantly who it was. Then my father said, I was doing genealogy years ago, and this is when he didn't have computers, so he would write letters to the city. And he was writing to get his mother and father's marriage certificate. But what came back to him were 2 marriage certificates. Now, my family of origin were Quakers. And the Quakers believe, like, they don't bury their dead with tombstones with names, because God knows where they are. So you don't share anything unless there's a reason to share it. So his father, Orrin, said, when he asked him about this, he said, "Well, there wasn't a reason to tell you until now." Well, he had been married to a woman named Ethel who died of the influenza. She was from Sitka, Alaska. She was a Tlingit Indian. Yeah. And he continued to share with my father. When she passed, we had only been married 3 months, and she was the love of my life. I was holding her when she passed, he said. She lifted, her soul lifted out of her body. She walked a few steps, turned around, and said, Oren, I will wait for you. Now, my interpretation of this story is, if she had lived, my father would have been her son. I would have been her granddaughter. And she took this lineage on as her own. And so she would come to me as if I was her granddaughter, right? To help me. She understood my gift and wanted to support me. So it was a real aha moment. I call them defining moments in my life to help me understand who I was, how I was wired.
Fascinating, because again, it's funny how everything comes full circle. We talk about the circle of life, but we have circles of moments
Yes.
that reveal where there should be. There'll be people that were listening that will be like, okay, sounds a little wacky or a little crazy. We know, right? Because,
I know.
but,
And yet it is.
and yet, if you go back
Yeah.
to thousands of years ago, those, like you say, were the soothsayers, the healers, the ones that were really making an impact in society. And then over time, as we either didn't understand it or feared it, we made it evil. I go back to England, where they used to burn the witches and take all the stuff, because it was people that had what I call special abilities, special powers to connect. And I'll add this: my mother, who, for me, the greatest lady that I've ever known.
Yes, you always talk so highly of her. I want to meet your mother someday.
She's brilliant, but she died giving
What?
birth to my twin brothers.
Oh my goodness.
And
Okay.
but she left her body,
Mm-hmm.
left the operating room, was up in the top corner going to the light, had angels waiting for her.
Yes.
And she would tell the story how she looked back and saw them
Mm.
fighting for her body. She saw the angels,
Yeah.
and she
Yeah.
said to the people, "It's okay, I'm at peace. You can let me go."
Mm-hmm.
And then she'll say to this day, unfortunately, my twin brothers ended up both passing, but she said she remembered me. And
Mm-hmm.
that made her want to fight to get back into her body. And,
Wow.
and like your father in your
Yeah.
situation there,
Yeah.
I never knew about it until someone called up when I was a young kid
Mm-hmm.
and asked to speak to my mum, and they were an American that was calling up because they'd gone through hospital records and seen people that had been dead for X amount of time and were writing a book about afterlife experiences. So
Yeah.
when I go back to how I started this, people that doubt it, it's there. It's
It's
real.
there.
Take the time to listen, and those that know, you're going to be enlightened in this next hour as to what Lisa can do. So let's go back. Were you a good
Thank you
student?
for sharing that.
No, my pleasure.
Yeah. I mean, that contributes to the conversation and what really happens in life. This is real stuff. Yeah.
I've experienced it myself, but I'll leave it with my mum right now, unless there's a reason to bring out my own experience.
Okay. All right.
Were you a good student?
Not really. I was a good student, but I doubted myself. I was raised that you don't ever want to bring attention to yourself. So I've come a long way in owning who I am. So you don't want to be the center of attention, and you don't want to be too much. The other thing is, I was really bullied in school. I grew up in Las Vegas in my childhood, and then in high school moved to Carson City, Nevada. So I was raised in Nevada. And it's a small community at the time. I think it was 18,000. It's still one high school, even as big as it is. But it was, everybody knew your business, Dan. And I was the new girl moving in. And I really got bullied. So when I would come home devastated, my dad will say, well, what did you do wrong? Right. And so what are you doing that makes him pick on you? It was just, I don't know what I was doing, except for, again, there's something wrong with me. So I wanted to always stay under the radar when I was in high school. So yes, I got good grades, but I was not valedictorian. It would have been too much on me.
So what was and obviously you had this connection
Yeah.
that was part of your life. It was like your
Yeah.
best friend walking with you.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, what was it that you were good at? What was it that you found? Because if we got fear, we also do have something that we cling to that we're
Yeah.
good at. What were you good at?
I was good at listening. I was a really good friend. And I found that I was good at problem solving other people's problems. It just came natural for me. But it also meant that I was the one always giving. So as an adult, I've had to learn to also receive, not just give. But I was a good friend. I loved riding bikes. I loved building forts. I was super creative that way. Mm-hmm.
You would get up and go, basically, though. It wasn't someone
Yeah.
feeling sorry
Yeah.
for themselves. You'd lived, even if you weren't free to live. So at what point, or how did you transition and get to the point of understanding or researching epigenetics? Because it's not something they're going to teach at school. It's not something you're going to stumble across in a book and go, how did you get to where you are to start the journey?
That's a really good question. So during this postpartum depression, it got bad enough that I would say to myself, you know what, God, if you just want, or source, if you just want to, if I get in an accident, it's okay. Because this isn't exactly, I mean, I function, I was good at putting on a mask, but when I didn't have to put on a mask, I was flat. I was on my sofa. I was never bedridden because I'm too stubborn. Does that make sense? Like I just was not going to get into bed. But that doesn't mean I didn't lay all day on the sofa, right? That's where it was. And I remember thinking if there was a magic vial from my sofa to my bay window in my living room, I have a big, beautiful desk in front of it, table. I didn't have the strength to get up and get it. And so I knew that I was so depleted. My husband says to me, let's go to Cabo for your birthday. Okay, right? And I have this side, you will know this when I say it, but I have this daredevil side to me and a competitive side. So especially like in games and sports and things like that. So we're in Cabo and we decide that we're going to have an ATV bike ride. We each have our own ATV bike rides. But there's an important element that I want to share here since we've already talked about my childhood. My mother passed away right after I'd had my third child. So I didn't have my mother here to tell me that it's depression. I didn't have anybody to tell me because I didn't open up to people. So again, I put on a mask that I was okay, but I was really suffering inside. So the night before we go on this ATV excursion, my mother comes to me in a dream. And I'm sure that that's part of what I was going through is that my mom, my best friend, who had given me all directions and made decisions, was not here. She comes to me in a dream, Dan, and she's very fair-skinned. And she's wearing bright red lipstick. And I said, Mom, that is the ugliest red lipstick. Why are you wearing that? She just grinned. She had this beautiful smile. And she said, Lisa, because you will never forget I was here. And it's true. I've never forgotten that. That red lipstick anchored in my conscious brain. But she said, I want you to know, Lisa, that I can do more for you on this side of the veil than I could on that side with you. That was it. Message delivered. I wake up the next morning. I remember, of course, but I go about my day and we go on this ATV excursion. Now we're both on our own four-wheel bikes and we both end up back on these white sand dunes like 10 minutes before, too early. And I hear the big, like a high school blowhorn, like they do when they cheer. And it's telling us to come in. And I said to Steve, we're in early. I'll race you to the top of that hill. Truth be told, I was probably off before I even finished my sentence because of course I was going to win, right? But I never bothered to look at that hill. It was a sand dune that you wouldn't go down and you would never go up. So by the time I reached halfway up, my ATV, the two rear wheels dug in, the two top wheels lifted off, and it comes back on top of me. And as the ATV is about ready to land, my spirit disconnects from my body. And I'm watching this in real time. And I hear, are you staying or are you going? And I connect dots really fast. And I said, if it was my time to go, you wouldn't be giving me a choice. But you see, Dan, I had been saying, you know what, if my heart stops beating, it's okay. Maybe somebody else would be a better mom. My husband's adorable. You know what I'm saying? We make up these stories that aren't true. But anyway, I was being given a choice. So I said, okay, you're giving me a choice, which means it's really not my time. I'll stay. I disconnect further. And I hear again, are you staying or are you going? And I knew it was a defining moment and I had to decide. And I said, I'm staying. And I declared, I'm staying. To which I landed back in my body as the ATV landed. It's 880 pounds, landed back on top of me. The handlebar broke, went up through my jaw, split my lip, and they carried me out on a plank about this big. There wasn't a doctor that was available. It was a holiday. So they called in from a neighbor. It took them 2 hours to get to me, and a gastroenterologist / veterinarian. And he told me and my husband that I was paralyzed. My husband, Steve, looks at me and he said, you are not paralyzed. You will walk out of here. And he said to the doctor, she is not paralyzed. She will walk out of here. And it was, again, a defining moment, kind of like I had a choice in a sense. Not everybody gets that, but I felt like I was being given a choice. How do you want to live your life? I walked out of there. This doctor did an amazing job sewing up my jaw. I have a big old hole here, sewing up my lip. And interior, worked on the interior. So much so that when I went to a plastic surgeon here in California, he said, I can't do a better job. So I laid in bed for 6 weeks with bruised head to toe. And this is what changed my life, Dan, is I said, okay, if I wasn't supposed to go and it's not my time, you didn't give me a vision about what I do. And I do have a belief on hindsight here in my life that if I had been shown what I was going to do back when I was in that accident, there's no way I would have believed that I'd be doing it. I wouldn't have known how to take action. I don't think we're supposed to know, because I don't think we're supposed to know the end from the beginning. It's the process of taking action in our life that the miracles happen, the opportunities happen. So this is what I said. I made an agreement. I said, don't send me anything you don't want me to do, because I am not cognitively aware enough at this point in my life. I have been living on 3 super big gulps from my life force energy. I've been living on 3 super big gulps from 7-Eleven every single day to get that energy to move forward, even though I knew it was awful for me. Okay. So I made the decision, no more. I already have a migraine. I already hurt head to toe. No more. But whatever you send me, I'm going to say yes to. So don't send me anything you don't want me to say yes to until I can get stronger. So I started diving into nutrition. I started diving into health. I started taking certifications. And one thing led to another. And I started for fun. So I used to work in corporate America, just so you know. Then it segued when I stayed home for my children. I made that decision when my last was born. That then I ran a home-based business, was very good at that, but it was still depleting to me. So now I'm doing all these things, and I start working with people for free to see what I think, right? And do we have time for me to share a story about this?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Since I brought you along on this path, this will now tell you how I got into epigenetics. My very first client, one of my first clients, was male. And he believed that life expired. There wasn't any afterlife. It just expired. The soul, everything expired. And he was raised that way. And he comes to me with a lot of grief and working things out in his life. But he expresses to me his hatred for his father. Absolute hatred. Every cell, he said, in my body hates my father. Well, his father comes to the session. So my client's on my right side of me. This client's father is standing in front of me on my left saying, tell my son I'm sorry. Tell my son I'm sorry. Well, we got a lot going on here in this moment. One, I don't tell anybody I'm clairvoyant, clairaudient, or clairsentient. I don't tell anybody, right? Never told anybody. 2, his son hates him. And 3, he doesn't believe in life after death. Oh, okay. Now what am I going to do, right? I'm releasing abandonment at the time. So an abandonment for him was inherited on his father's side, ironically, right? And I just think, okay, Lisa, who are you? Well, you're a woman of truth. You're a woman of honor. So you're just going to tell him. So I said to my client, I know you don't believe in life after death, but your father is here in the room with us. He breaks out in full-on tears in this moment. He felt it. He knew the reality of it. He knew the truth of it. And I said, and he's telling me, he's asking me to tell you that he's sorry. Now he's sobbing. Okay. Well, a vision opens up in my mind, for a lack of a better, like another diorama type of scenario. And I see this man as a little boy, and he's running. He hears his father drive up the driveway, and I see him running to his parents' bed, climbing under his parents' bed, worming himself through all sorts of empty alcohol bottles, vodka, beer, bourbon. It was all these empty bottles under his father's bed, and he lays perfectly still. And I realized his father was an alcoholic, a raging alcoholic, and he would come and beat his kids. And so this little boy would run and hide. Well, that helped me. But what the miracle was in this is that as I released abandonment, as I released these different things, his body did the releasing. I'm a facilitator. I also saw this man's soul getting lighter. So when I was releasing it from him, it was releasing from his father. All this trauma that he inflicted on his son was also with him. He was raised by an alcoholic father. And he became lighter. And I was learning in real time that these things release from those that have passed on, as well as from us. The real amazing thing in all this for me is that I was expecting that this man would never come back to me. Because you see, I'd been told that people won't accept me for who I am. So while it's beautiful that there was this healing experience with his father, it was beautiful that I was being taught in real time that it was clearing from his father. I was expecting that he would never come back. That was the given. That was the choice I made when I announced what was happening. But as we got to my front door and he turned around and he said, when can I come back? I was totally caught off guard. So I closed my front door, Dan, and I literally fell on the ground in tears, because for the first time in my life, I understood why I had these gifts. For the first time in my life, I understood that there was a reason why I had these gifts. and that I wasn't going to be rejected by everybody in society because I saw things in real time.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's it's fascinating to understand again how things move. How many years was between when you knew you had these special gifts but told to stay quiet
Mhm.
and the accident that woke you up to then start exploring epigenetics?
40 years.
40 years.
Yeah.
This takes me
Yeah.
back.
I've always said to myself that I was a late bloomer. When I was 16, I looked 10. And when I'm just, I've always felt like I was a little bit behind. I was learning, I was going through things. And I knew that my life experiences were part of my process on planet Earth. Hmm.
Well, it tied back into something you said earlier. You were
Yeah.
always Alice in Wonderland, going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Now, here you are 40 years later,
Yeah.
being Alice in Wonderland,
Mm-hmm.
going down this rabbit hole that, as you
Mm-hmm.
said, whatever you say, I'll say yes.
Yeah.
And now you're this mature, beautiful lady that has got a whole new life path.
Mm.
You've got this first gentleman that turned
Mm-hmm.
around and said, when can I come back? And that really was the catalyst to change your life because now
Mm-hmm.
you realized. How did it progress from there?
I became, well, I have a belief that when you're really doing something that you're passionate about, I think that we can have multiple life purposes. I don't think there's one glorious, all almighty purpose in our life. I think one thing leads to another. But I was on a path now that was feeding my soul, where, oh my goodness, I have a purpose. This is why I'm here. And one thing led to another. And I became very busy very fast. People were referring me very quickly that they were feeling better. They were experiencing a change that years of other work had not yielded the result. And so I was seeing anywhere from 6 to 8 people a day, Dan. My sessions are an hour long. So can you imagine trying to do life like that? Yeah, I did it for a long time until one day I woke up and I just couldn't move. And I'm like, what's happening? And I heard you have to start charging. You're giving everything, you're depleting your resources by generously doing all this. So I probably did that for a solid year with no fee because I thought, well, this is a gift. And you can't charge for a gift. How often are we raised that we can't charge for something that comes easy for us? We can't charge for something that's a God given gift, so to speak.
Mm.
Um, when it comes to, so that was a path of, okay, well, I'm going to start a business then. It's now going to be a business. And I really owned that. And then there was a defining moment where I tell my husband that I'm now going to have a business doing this. And we've come a long way in this, but it's really the path that started me down the rabbit hole. Okay. My husband has a very science brain.
Mm.
And if it's not in science, it doesn't exist. That's what it was 20 years ago for him. So this was a defining moment. We were in the car, it's sitting right in front of our house. And I said, hey, I'm going to start a business. And he looked at me and he said, I do not want to tell my clients that my wife has healer hung from the shingles of our house. Again, he was trying to protect me and him, right? And yet I was now doing something that I really loved. I had found purpose in my life for the first time, different. Yes, I love being a mother. Yes, being a mother feeds so much aspect of my feminine side. But here I was doing something completely unique to Lisa that opened me up in a way that I never knew was possible. And I took a breath and I said, babe, I love you. And we have a really good marriage. And I wouldn't let something like this mean that I'm not staying with you. But energetically, that's what's going to happen if you put this rule on me, because it will mean then that I can't share anything going on in my life because you don't want to hear about it. You don't want to know it's happening. And then what's going to happen over time is I'm going to be here and you're going to be here and we're going to go, who are we? I would much rather, I said, because I can't say no to this. This is what I'm being called to do. This is part of why I am the way I am. And I've never been happier than right now. So I'm not going to say no to myself. So now we're defining moment. What do we do together about this? He said, oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you what he did is he challenged me every moment. Every moment we were together, he challenged, how come I knew this? How could this be real? How could it release from those that have come before? Well, I'll add to it. It releases from those that are alive too. I'll share another story later, but on how I was tutored in that. But then I started researching. Then Google became my friend, right? And I started doing research, a lot of research about 15 years ago about how things get handed down to us. Anyway, one thing led to another, and I land on this. One of the very first studies about this is from Emory University. And it was a study done on rats, and it's called the cherry blossom study. And the cherry blossom study, this is what they did. They blew cherry blossom fragrance into the cage of rats. And at the same time, they zapped their feet. They did this 10 times. Then they didn't do it anymore. And what they found is the rats had severe anxiety when they smelled cherry blossom, even though they didn't zap their feet anymore. But what they weren't expecting is that their pups also had anxiety, never being zapped on their feet. Then the real excitement came when they took the male mice, they impregnated them with female rats that had never been exposed to the experiment, to the study. And those pups had anxiety when they smelled cherry blossom fragrance. That started this whole thing on what is the science of inherited emotional DNA. That's really what epigenetics is the expression of our DNA and how we experience things in life. So now I had a study that proved what I was doing, and one thing led to another. And that's how come I talk about it.
No, it's amazing. And I've been fortunate enough to witness your group and those you work with,
Yeah.
and having worked with you as well myself.
Thank
And
you.
it's been fascinating. What I'd love for you to explain, though,
Mm-hmm.
how do you cure epigenetics? Or I should say clear, right? Because it's not clear.
Clear.
I'm not
Yeah,
asking you
cure
to
is a big word that gets into the medical stuff that,
yeah.
for a long time, Dan, I was very resistant. In fact, I've rebranded to get rid of the word healer because it has such a connotation. Now in 2025, right? People aren't so negatively attached to the word, but for a long time it was. And the truth is, I'm not doing the healing. People's bodies, our subconscious knows everything about us. It knows why we are the way we are. It knows everything we've ever eaten. It knows every interaction that we've forgotten about. And it thinks that it's protecting us when it keeps these fears stored. So, for example, let's say mom forgot you in kindergarten. And this happened actually for a client, okay? A client's mom forgot her in kindergarten, and the emotion of abandonment trapped, for example. Years later, she thinks she has everything figured out. She comes to me because she has a hard time staying in relationships. She wants to solve that. Well, it comes up about abandonment at 5, and she goes, yeah, but I figured that out. And this is a perfect example of how we think we cognitively have an experience figured out. But if that megahertz, if that frequency lives within us, it's going to create patterns in our life to prove that we're not safe. So this is how it rolled out for her. Her boyfriend had gone to Las Vegas and said that he would call her at 2 p.m., say. And 2:15 came and went. He hadn't called. She called her mom and said, I'm done. He's not my guy. Well, why? Because he didn't call me. Once again, he didn't call me. 2:45, he calls on someone else's phone and says, hey, babe, I lost my phone. It was stolen. So this nice lady I'm sitting with is letting me use her phone. He didn't abandon her. Something happened, right? And the subconscious thinks it's protecting us, like, oh, you're not safe being in a relationship. People leave you when they come in. And so we create these stories and these experiences to prove that we're not safe, right? To prove that we can't be in a relationship. But at the same time, when the subconscious, we make friends with the subconscious, it's going to tell us what needs to be released. Did I answer the question? Because I kind of got off on a side tangent, I think.
No, it's great because it's again examples, and I'm sure there's so many people that can relate to things.
Yeah.
I have that myself, where it when I'm accused of not telling the truth when I'm telling the truth, it triggers things.
Yeah.
Because I know how do you prove to someone when you're telling the truth and they don't believe you? But I
Mm-hmm.
had to learn to come to peace with that by going back and saying, where did it all start from?
Mm-hmm.
And and again, from your point of expertise, it's generational. It may not just be me, but if we don't release it, we will continue to pass it down. It's not just life we give, it's past life that we give.
It's past life that we give that creates us. And, I just want to say this isn't ancestor blaming. We're not blaming, like, we do get really good things from our ancestors. And it's just the evolution of being human, right? Is we're going to get these. In fact, it's the evolution of being superhuman, is to figure out that this is how we're wired and what do we do with it? How do we let go what doesn't serve us so that we can really fulfill who our soul is and live into that?
No, absolutely. Because so there's a couple of things I've been doing so much research because of total balance and the balance training.
Yeah.
And then I was working with Dr. Porter, who's been on here as well, great brain scientist. And he says, we agree with, we never lose our memory. Everything we've ever seen, heard,
Mhm.
smelled, done is stored. What we have is an accessibility issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the brain is functioning in that way, which is
Mm-hmm.
easy to explain, we're walking down the street, we can't remember the name of something, and we give up, and 2 days
Yeah.
later, suddenly you remember the name. It's not because we saw it again, it came up.
Mm-hmm.
And then with balance, Lisa, there's a part of the cerebellum called the pyramus. It
Mm-hmm.
has a memory. The cerebellum, for those that don't know, is part of our control system for movement. But within that is stored a memory that was just discovered in 2024 that when we have an accident or something that was a danger to us with
Mm-hmm.
movement, it's stored in the cerebellum that then goes to the brain and says, I remember this, I've got to slow down, freeze, or
Mm-hmm.
pause, and it stops us reacting. All from
Wow.
memory, which fully supports everything
Wow.
you already know.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to go back to ancestor blaming.
Yeah.
I remember you telling a story that really like hit me hard as to epigenetics and past. I'd
Okay.
love if you would share the story about the tall female skier that you worked with.
Oh, that's right. And she was 70. She was, if I remember right, she was from Germany. She was athletic. She was a skier. And she was coming to me because she was hunching over at her waist. And she's like, I'm strong. I don't want to hunch. It wasn't her shoulders. It was like a waist thing. Like she was just bending down low. And she's like, I got to figure this out. Like, I'm strong and I'm athletic and I want to live my life. And she was actively skiing. Well, this is what it was. Her parents, her father was a survivor of the Holocaust. And what came to my mind was that, and I didn't know this, by the way, I didn't know that her family, that this was part of her lineage. And so I said to her, tell me about someone in your lineage who was part of the Holocaust, because he's standing with a group of people and he's very tall. She was tall, but she doesn't want to stand out. Like he crouches down. So there's a little boy by him and he's constantly talking to the little boy with the intention of not being seen. Does not want to stand his true height. And then she said to me, actually, that's when she said, well, he's a Holocaust survivor. And he died standing lower than he was because he was afraid of being seen. He didn't feel safe being seen. Mm-hmm. Right? Cleared that up. She's back on the slope skiing. Yeah, it's a great story.
Yeah, I remember, like I said, it impacted me thinking
Mm-hmm.
back to here's someone that's suffering to stay
Yeah,
alive.
yeah.
And yet that was passed down to the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
That here he has this tall daughter who's skiing,
Yeah,
suddenly with no reason that we could physically or medically.
yeah, yeah.
So take me through the
Wisdom.
process. So if someone said, okay, Lisa, I'm suffering from some trauma or some physical ailments or some mental
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
stoppage that needs clarity. So
Mm-hmm.
they call you up. How do you go through the process? What is the process
Good
that,
question.
yeah.
Let's back up a moment. So for a long time, I wouldn't take people that had physical ailments. And I'll tell you why. I do now, but I have verbiage to. It's because the subconscious is going to look for what's wrong, what's missing, I mean. So let's say somebody comes to me and they've had a knee pain for 10 years. Can you get rid of my knee pain? Okay, I'm not magical. Meaning I'm not doing something that's going to just create the pain to go. The body has pain for a reason, and you know this, Dan. Like it's years of things happening where the subconscious grabs an experience, puts it in a place that it thinks it needs support, and then over time, if we haven't listened to our body, we're going to have pain. And so by the time we get pain, the body is just screaming at us, pay attention to me, pay attention to me, I need help. And for the subconscious, it's like when we lose our keys. So let's say an hour session got rid of the pain in the knee. That's the only thing they wanted. What happens is the subconscious just digs and digs and digs to find it. So you might go 2 or 3 days and all of a sudden you have a pain again in your knee because you're so used to living with pain in the knee that the subconscious will go find pain. So to answer your question, because the subconscious knows everything, I created through kinesiology a form of muscle testing. The subconscious is really good at giving us fluff. Once the subconscious knows that pain doesn't serve you, then it's going to let it go. So when somebody comes to me, I say, okay, I understand you've got pain in your knee, but where else in your life are you suffering? So I'll ask them, what do you want to get rid of in your life? Like, what's something you want to stop doing or you want to let go of? Or on the flip side, where do you want to have more experiences? What do you want to have happen in your life? Do you want to have deeper connections with people? Do you want business to be easier? Do you want to stop struggling in business? Whatever that is, you can answer me either way. And when they do, then that's a game changer because I formulate questions for the subconscious, and I always talk out loud. You know this.
Mm.
I believe that everything needs to be transparent so that both of us are on the same page. So I'll formulate questions for their subconscious, like, what needs to be released to stop the pattern of struggling for your worth? So often entrepreneurs struggle to make money, or CEOs do. They'll work 12-hour days to prove that they deserve that right to be president or whatever it is, right? And that over years of time will create pain energy in the body. It can also be inherited, by the way. Okay. That pattern of struggle for your worth can be inherited, and then we relive it. So I asked the question to the body. I wish I had a scan list in here, and I've created a scan list of 280 words. So one thing that I've learned over the years is that every word in the dictionary has a megahertz attached to it, has a frequency attached to it. So an easy example would be love is a very high frequency. That's a great place to have this energy vibrating out of our body. And that's what happens. We vibrate at a frequency, we send this out unbeknownst to us, and then it's going to hit and resonate with somebody else. So that's why somebody might have a pattern of attracting people that abandon them, right? In relationships, just a different face, but the pattern repeats. So I'll scan the list through muscle testing, this kinesiology that I developed, and that it will give me the word from the subconscious, so to speak. So I'm really fast at scanning. Like I'll scan by color, I scan by row, I get the word. So let's just stay with abandonment, okay? Then I'll ask out loud, is it inherited? If it's inherited, I'll test, is it on the mother's side or the father's side? Oh, it's the mother's side. Okay, and how many generations does it go back? And then I test in group numbers. So I can tell you how many generations it goes back on your mom's side. And I think that's important. It's important because one, gives clarification for the client. Oh, this makes sense. Oh, I remember dinner topics around money and how money doesn't grow on trees. And oh, that came from her mom? Yeah, it did, right? There's a sense of freedom. I really love creating freedom in people's life. So instead of it being wrong or them being bad, oh, this is how come I feel this way. And abandonment, the subconscious will release it from the body. I don't even have to be present. I can be on the phone with a client. I'll release it from their organs and tissues, and I'm always talking out loud. And the subconscious, because it trusts that it's serving the client's highest good, it does all the work itself. The body will release what doesn't serve it. Mm-hmm.
Crazy. I remember when we went through mine, and it was
Yeah.
years ago. I know you went back 9 generations
Yeah.
on my father's side. And there were really three areas that you went back, two on my mother's, one on my father's.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so spot on that when I spoke to my parents about it, they could also associate. There was no disconnect.
Wow.
Like,
Wow.
they,
Yeah.
and it also explained why they lived the life they lived. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this is one of the gifts that you bring. Often we'll go through or we'll only get something
Mm-hmm.
that we have a guarantee. I know if I go and buy a brand new car with a 36,000 mile warranty, I know if anything goes wrong, bumper to bumper, I can take it
Right.
fix it.
Right.
But we're much more reserved to go and say, okay, well, it's exactly the same car, exactly the same warranty, except it doesn't have the color that I want. And so we step away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If we took away the guarantee, but we knew with promises that they would correct everything, that you could have that car changed to a different color if you wanted when
Mm-hmm.
you wanted,
Mm-hmm.
we'd then jump in.
Sure.
What's the hardest thing that you find with people accepting that you truly can change their life? Well, like I said, you have the gift to open it up. And as you said,
I have a process. So anybody can learn my method. They don't have to be me. They don't have to be clairvoyant, clairaudient. Oftentimes, people that have these gifts find a place in the method, but I've trained many people in the method, the system that I created, that don't have those gifts. You don't have to have them. But I appreciate what you're saying. Thank you.
someone coming in, of course, someone coming in, or they hear about it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
so many people are fascinated,
Yeah.
but not everybody takes the step to do
Yeah.
it. Do you think that's a fear of finding out because they've hidden for so many years and learned to survive
Mm,
because the body and brain is,
good question.
or do you think it's just a fact that um, that they don't want to try it? It's scary.
I also think, Dan, it could be either of those, and it can be the fear of change. How often in our life do we get so comfortable with the way it is, even our suffering? We know what suffering feels like. That fear of change. So if somebody says, I want more in my life, or they feel like maybe I want more, then you're bumping up against, well, who am I to want more? And would that mean that I live in more overwhelm if I have more? Right? I think the root is the fear of change. is what will it be then if I change, if I shift? I find that the people that come to work with me have already done a lot of work. They've done work. They want to live more in that peak performance. I mean, that's not really possible every day of our life. We have experiences, but they know that they're here to make an impact and they want to make an impact with people, whether it's they're doing clean water in Bolivia or they're a Hollywood producer. The category of how they're making an impact doesn't matter to me. It's their desire that they want to let go of what's not serving them. Those people, they know, they feel it. They feel that this will work for them. And then there's those people, like you say, that might have that science brain that they want to see the proof of it. And I just realized that those types of people, while I can help them, it's not as enjoyable because I feel like I have to prove something there. So I just think there's different types of people, and what might not be possible for them now might be in a year. They might go, oh, wait a minute, let me revisit that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in all that I do with, Born Superhuman and training, as you know, so many people
Yeah,
to betterment. The biggest start comes back to the old saying, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right.
that's right.
One comes in resistant. I look at it and say, you don't believe you'll get better, you
You
won't.
won't. You
Mhm.
won't get better.
Find a way to stay sick.
Mm-hmm.
What so you have, let's just give you a scenario. I have a parent
Mm-hmm.
that is suffering maybe from abandonment issues,
Mm-hmm.
and having gone through a divorce,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're struggling financially and working unbelievable because they're taking care of their kids,
Ooh,
right? But
so they're an overgiver too.
uh,
Yeah.
my mother was that, when she went through the divorce, looking after five kids and a disabled brother and
Mm-hmm.
the students that she brought in to help, bring in financials so that we could be okay. But if she came to you and knowing that that trauma has now been passed down to her kids,
Mm-hmm.
can you help her and release the kids, or do you have to
Mm-hmm.
work individually with each person?
No, I call this this is a great question. I call it a tender mercy, okay, from the universe for generic reasons, right? But tender mercy from the universe. And that is where, when it's cleared from the parent, it's going to clear both directions from those that have come before and those that are live. So I'll share a quick story. A woman came to me and she said, I really want you to work on my daughter. And I said, okay, how's your daughter? Because I have worked on children. And she goes, oh, she's 20. And I said, well, I can't just work on your daughter without her permission, and she'll need to come to me for that. And she said, well, I don't want to tell her. And I said, okay. She said, I think she's alcoholic. And I said, all right. I said, we can work on you, any addictions you have through your lineage, and I think it will help her. So this was October, and she saw me twice a month. And so we worked on her things like her addiction to work. Addiction doesn't have to show up as the same addiction. It can. The addiction of alcohol is very real. But somebody might inherit addiction, but that informational tag turns on a little bit differently. And so then they have the addiction to struggle, the addiction to perfectionism, right? It can be the addiction to control. How many people do we know that have to control every scenario of their life, or they're a hot mess? So it's New Year's Eve. And I get a text from this woman, and she goes, you are not going to believe it, Lisa. My daughter just walked in. She just turned 21, like 2 weeks before in December. And she walked in shaking the car keys saying, guess what, Mom? I volunteered to be the designated driver tonight. She had chosen not to drink alcohol. And she'd spent 3 years. Her mother felt she was alcoholic starting at 17. So, yes, you can clear from a parent and it will clear from the children, however they inherited it, however it's showing up in their life.
How would
Mm-hmm.
that change the relationship? Because if you're on your own journey, you've been released by your parents, say, for example, or
Mm-hmm.
could it go the other way where a child works on something and it releases the parents, and yet you haven't spoken about it?
It's the tender mercy of the universe. It's this gift. Our ancestors are very important in our life, even if we didn't get great parents. We don't all choose. I believe we choose our parents. And we choose the parents and the bloodline we're coming through because we want this life we want to grow in certain ways. And in order to grow, we choose experiences. And some of them are not good in order to develop us. So, despite the parents you get, we have lineage going back that aren't here anymore that are here to help us. So often our guardian angels are our ancestors. I have not found them to be direct parents, and there's a reason for that. Parents, they're too connected to us. They have too much of an opinion about who they think and what we think we should be doing. But grandparents and going back, so there'll be people that are involved in your life, Dan, that you don't know in this lifetime. but maybe before you came, you helped them in their lifetime. And it's a symbiotic, right, relationship of giving and receiving in this lifetime. So our ancestors are very important to us. And I'll share a quick story about, I was working on a young boy, and he had health issues at the time. And so it made it very difficult for him to get a shot in the doctor's office. The nurses, the doctor, everybody had to hold him down. So his mom brought him to me, and so that he could endure shots, basically, needles. And I'm releasing from him, and it was on his mother's side. And she's with children. The parents are always in the room with me. There's nothing to hide. And, but she looked shocked as she sat in my wingback chair in the living room. Like, what do you mean it's on my side? Panic is on my side. That's how I interpreted it. Okay. Well, he goes to the doctor in the next couple of days, and they send me a picture with him with his arm out, and he's getting the needle, and he's smiling, and he's sitting on his mom's lap. Well, what I didn't know, that she didn't tell me, is that she had a fear of needles. And so she was never staying in the room when he was traumatized because she couldn't handle it. So the nurses were trying to deal with it. So the takeaway here is his mother was holding him to have this shot, and that he was able to do that. And she was giving me this gratitude that she wasn't afraid to be in the room, but she'd never told me that. She'd never told me she had a fear of needles. And yet it was inherited on her side. And so her shock was really this amazement that it was so real life for her that I didn't know that, right? It wasn't that she was surprised, like, how could it be? And she was able to be in the room. So it's an example of working with a child and having it work on the parent at the same time.
Yeah, it brings up, I got so many questions, Lisa. Do this. We're going to make a whole Wikipedia about just you. I'm going to ask. So, what's the youngest you can work with a child to help? And then the same question,
Mm-hmm.
if a parent says, my child keeps talking about my best friend, which you had spoken about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
do you work with the parent and the child to understand what it is? Or is that something that you says need to naturally evolve? So, kind of a two-part. What's the youngest that you can work with to help relieve trauma? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and again, let's then take that into, a child that says they have a best friend that nobody can see.
You could work like I'm going to say a cranial sacral therapist might be a really good starting point if you think your infant has trauma from birth. Cranial sacral work would be great. Could I do it? Yes. But you want to bring somebody to me when they're experiencing something in their life, right? So if a child has a fear of spiders or they're not, I'll give you an example then with this little boy. His mother brings him back to me, and I'm like, what's going on? You're good now with needles. He goes, well, Lisa, I know that I'm little, but he said, I have a real fear of this boy at school. Or he said, of my friend at school. And then he goes, he's not really my friend, really. He said, I'm jealous of him. Wow. He said, he gets the coolest shoes and we can't afford those shoes. Ah, you see, that's something I can help with. Let's get rid of this inferiority. And, he was from the Latino culture. Well, it runs inferiority is a trigger in that culture anyway. And yet he recognized that he was jealous. Jealous is a frequency. I know a lot of adults that compare themselves to other people doing what they do, and they always feel inferior, like they have to catch up or they have a better life than they do. Like it trips us up as adults. So there are a lot of ways that you can help a child in their life to feel more confident. And there's other modalities. Therapy can help that. But as far as releasing vibrational energy, it really can be at any age. It just serves them more when they are able to recognize that there's something that they want to change in their life. Mm-hmm.
And that child that sees friends.
Yeah, that child that sees friends. I would tell the parent to really be supportive. Ask them, tell me about your friend. I mean, really believe your child when they say this. Do they wear different things every day or the same day? Do they wear the same thing every day? Do they visit you mostly in the morning? Do they come with you to school? Be in a conversation and in a dialogue with your child, right? And hey, do you want to set a place at the table for your friend? Let's invite him to dinner. This is nothing to make fun of them, to mock them, to humor them. It's that you're engaging in something that is very meaningful and real for them. And it doesn't mean that they're going to carry this friend with them for their whole life, but it might. Ethel stayed with me my whole life. Even though I wasn't aware of her being there for a long time, she was still around. Mm-hmm.
That's something that I was going to ask actually is there a time frame? Because I have this belief
Mm-hmm.
when I work with people that we signed a societal contract when we were born.
Mm-hmm.
We had no idea we were signing, that we would agree to believe what we were told, even if it wasn't in our best interest, because we didn't know any different.
Mhm.
As we age, and so let's take a young child, they're 2 years old, they got their best friend that comes to visit them there,
Mhm.
and then by five, that best friend is gone. Is that something that is, I don't want to say predetermined, but do you think a lot of that is because it's taught out of us and we lose that connection to the other side?
We do. We lose it because we're not believed. And that we don't have anybody to talk to about it. And we also lose it because our brains change and our lives change and we get busy with real life friends. And it doesn't mean it won't come back or that it wasn't real. It just means that they're in a different stage in their life. Yeah,
It's a fascinating topic that could go on and
we
on.
could. Yeah.
About your book.
About my book. I'll write a book about it.
So you don't have a book yet, right?
I do have a book. I have a book for women called Mistakes into Money. It shares stories like this because oftentimes, and I wrote it for women because oftentimes women in particularly, if they make a mistake or they think they didn't do life right or they got married maybe twice hypothetically, then who are they to be somebody? And that who are we as somebody is such a narrow term that we define ourselves by. And I love to eradicate that. And often the experiences that we go through, always the experiences we go through, lead us to our life, who we are. It's when we can gain the wisdom from our experiences that then it changes our life. And it's often those experiences that we can start a business around. It's often those experiences that can help us move into a business that's more, or to a career that more feeds our soul. And so I do have a book, and I have thought about writing another book. So it's interesting you said it the way you did.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, well, first off, when you write the book, you have to come and launch it on this podcast. We'll sit down and we'll go through that. So I think the time frame
Deal.
you've got one.
Deal.
That's it. I know we're kind of coming a little bit to the end, but tell us more about what this journey has now brought you. Because I know you're speaking around the world, you're being flown around the world. Tell me, here comes this young Lisa who wanted to be hidden almost.
I spent my half my life hidden, the first half of my life.
And now,
And now I'm very visible without trying. Yeah. And I have opportunities. I have opportunities to travel the world. I just got back, like you said, from Bali, where I was asked to speak at a retreat. And oftentimes things come up in our life where we're like, yeah, that's too complicated, can't do that. And it's really the resistance we have, right? That could be the fear change. And that's what happened on this one. It was a date wasn't working, but really the thought of traveling and 8 days away, it took me 2 days to get there. I then stayed 3 days after. That's a lot of time away. So that means potentially I could be burning the candle at the front and the back end of the trip to make, get my clients in, make up that difference. But in 8 days, so I said no because of the date. She changed the date. And I'm like, okay, all right. I took a breath and I'm like, I do feel this call to go. And Dan, it was the most amazing experience. It was 8 days flew back by like it was two. I experienced people and transformation. And it's by saying yes to experiences that we really figure out who we are. I know you believe that. If we don't say yes to experiences, we aren't going to figure out that we can do more. So I had a segment way longer than I'm used to. And I went into this event because I was the last speaker of 8 days. Now, there's good and bad to that. The bad is everybody's exhausted. The good is I can morph it to be what they need at the time. But I was able to facilitate a group experience like I've never done before. And if I had said no to that, I wouldn't know what was possible when I was called to do it. Follow me? Like I was given this opportunity and it ended up being way better than I could have experienced. So I find in my life now that the experiences I have are very enriching for my soul, that I continue to develop. And as I continue to develop, it helps me with my clients. Because when they say, oh, Lisa, who am I to do more in the world? I'm like, oh, you're exactly who the world needs. Let's see what that resistance is to doing more. Because doing more doesn't mean efforting more. Doing more doesn't mean struggling more. It means experiencing more of the possibility of who you are and why you came to Earth.
and sharing the unique you, because it's
Yeah,
what
exactly.
we're best at.
Hmm.
It's funny because I'm a huge believer, and I always say we don't stop playing because we age. We age because we stop playing. And this
That's
goes
right.
back to Alice in Wonderland again.
It does. It
Right?
does.
If you look at you in your 39th year and what you thought your future was, and now you yourself now,
Yeah.
oh, it's a whole different world. And we do only live once, as much as we hear the, you only live once thing.
Hmm.
Life is to be lived. It's to experience, as you've used that word many times in our talks. I've
Hmm.
heard
Hmm.
it so many times. And you're helping people live the greatest life. I always say, what's the memories we're going to take to the grave with us?
Yeah.
It should be the
Yeah.
ones that give us the greatest feelings of love, joy, and happiness,
Hmm.
knowing that we didn't waste a second.
Yeah. So it's saying yes to things you don't think you can do, because we can come up with all sorts of stories why we can't do something. And we could have a whole nother discussion about the stories of, with both of us, around when we said yes to something and we did something superhuman because of it. Yeah.
Beautiful. My girlfriend was told when she was young that she couldn't sing. She was a terrible singer when she got in the choir, that you should keep
Yeah.
your mouth shut.
Oh,
And she grew up never believing she could sing. But, other members of the family were
yeah.
singers.
Yeah.
For Christmas this year, I bought her 4 singing lessons, and she was so angry. You've done that. I can't sing. I can't do this. Now she's going to be performing on stage. She's
Wow.
French. These beautiful French songs. Her favorite is Voila.
Yeah.
And she sounds fantastic. And again, going back to,
Hmm.
as you talk
Exactly.
about, we're not what we're told. We
Mm-mm.
unleash the miracle within that
That's
is,
right.
you're bringing that. The one thing that I'd love you to finish with, and I
Yeah.
ask each person this, what's the one message you would love to share with the world that will last for eternity?
Wow. That your life has purpose. And it doesn't matter what's happened in your life. It doesn't matter what generational patterns you've inherited or your life experiences. There is more purpose and more passion and more happiness and more love within you. And it is in your divine right to experience this in your life. You can experience more happiness, more love, and more deep connection for anybody, everyone. It's important for me that people know that.
I really appreciate you taking the time. I see the love
Mm.
in your eyes because you're so giving and caring. And I hope people reach out. We'll put a link up on there as well,
Okay.
be able to
Hmm.
find how to reach you. But thank you so much for what you do. There's no accidents in life.
No accidents. And I am very appreciative of the interview. I love being on here. I think the world of you, Dan. I have from the moment we went. I think we talked for 3 hours that first night we met, nonstop. And that's what happens. I call them divine synchronicities. When they happen in our life, you're not going to meet anybody without there being a reason you're meeting them. And to really be aware that everything is happening to you for a reason and for us for a reason. Hmm. And I'm very grateful for you. That comment was about my gratitude for you.
Thank you so much. Well, it's been
Hmm.
my honor. And it's my honor to be able to bring you to our audience as well. And I'm so excited. Keep believing in everybody.
Yeah,
It's beautiful. Lisa, thank you so much for being here. And I hope to see you very soon.
absolutely.